Hello everyone, welcome back to Old Town. Before we get into the time lapse of the oil refinery, I just wanted to show you a few more details that I added to Old Town. So let's check it out. I added some of these nice flangers to each crossing. I'm not really too sure if they need to go at every single crossing or how these exactly work. I know I've always seen them at crossings, so I added one to each crossing on the way down. And I thought that was a nice little detail. As we work our way down, I also added some nice frogs, and I think that adds a lot of depth to the junctions. I know that Trainz a New Era now has the option to have procedural track where the junction is automatically gets a frog and moving switch points, but I haven't found any track that I really like just yet. So until somebody comes out with nice procedural track, I'm just going to keep doing this. So each junction has frogs and switch stands and the flangers, and I also added a little scene over here. I added in a couple crossing lights here for where the trucks will be entering the highway, and I added a sign as well. Trucks entering highway sign. I got another little scene over here, utility work ahead, and I put a couple of construction vehicles down. I thought that was just kind of a cool little thing to break up this dead space over here. At this point, I'd like to move on to other things. I've been working on Old Towns for about a month or two before I even started recording these videos, so I think it's about as detailed as it's going to get right now. I'm getting a little burned out. So let's get into the time lapse of the oil refinery, and then we can move on to Bonnie and some other good stuff. I'd like to start off this time lapse first by saying thank you to my first few subscribers. The feedback I've been getting here on YouTube as well as on Twitter is very much appreciated and makes this hobby that much more satisfying. With that in mind, I also would like to mention that if you have a Snapchat, I would love for you to send me some snaps of your inspiration and your builds. I want to make these videos as community-based as possible. When I started building this refinery, I didn't think it was going to be as major of a build as it turned out to be. I mean, for one thing, you could build an entire layout that's just an oil refinery and nothing else. Once I started looking around on Google Earth, that became pretty apparent, but I wanted to see what I could get done here. I've been recording this build for about 2 weeks now, and recorded somewhere around 5 hours of footage that I've now compressed into this time lapse. For the sake of episode length, and my own sanity, I was only able to get this build to a certain point before I had to stop. This build could easily be a 2, 3, or even 4-part video, but I think everyone would be bored with it by then. So we'll revisit this build sometime in the future for finer detail work, but here you'll get to see what I consider a huge amount of progress. We start with a nearly blank tile and end up with a pretty sizable complex by the end of it. What I'm doing here is spending a few moments locating the relevant assets I want to use for this build. I'm essentially building a palette for myself to work in. This way I don't have to constantly stop and search for the right tank or smokestack. Again, copying and pasting saves a ton of time. All those tanks are now rotated and in the same direction, and I can easily place a bunch of them with just one click. I always like the way that it looks when the track is right up against the road, especially when it's an industrial track and freight cars are parked right there. It's just so cool. One thing I noticed when I was looking at these complexes on Google Earth is the amount of abandoned track that runs through these facilities. I wanted to have the same effect, so here I'm putting in a defunct spur. I'm achieving that telltale look by partially burying the rails in the ground so that they pop out here and there. It was right around here that I noticed all my splines were floating. It took me a bit to figure out what was going on, but for some reason they were being placed with a gradient applied. I'm not sure, but I think it's a bug in the game since there's no gradient tool for road and fence splines. I had to go back and fix everything by hand. I really wasn't sure what to put in this spot because it's kind of an odd shape. I didn't want to add more tanks because I didn't want to overdo it. I figured employee parking would be a good detail to add, and it's probably my favorite part for some reason. I don't know what it is, but I love parking lots. Maybe it's because they're all over the place and are an often overlooked detail to model. But once you add a parking lot, everything seems that much more livelier. I didn't want to have just a bunch of parking spaces in a big asphalt lot because that's a bit plain. What I noticed is that in big industrial areas like this, there's a tendency by the developers to do at least a little landscaping to make things a little less sterile. So I found this grassy median on the demo station and I really like it. I'll probably be using it a lot more in the future. last section is a bit of a big jump. I've been recording this episode pretty much since I uploaded the last one. I also realized that my recording was getting a little long, so I wanted to do some off-camera work for the sake of episode length. But here I am, again, sorting out my palette for some of the final details for this build. I'm not going to claim I have any idea what any of this equipment does. I'm just trying to get the general feel of the place into the game. There was a popular model railroader named Dean Freytag, who modeled the steel industry in HO scale. He was known for these incredibly detailed, nearly to scale structures. In fact, Walters partnered with him to make their scale steel industry models. But people would visit his layout and ask him what this pipe did or what that chimney was for, and his response was, "Who cares? It looks cool." So I kind of had him in the back of my mind when I was designing this area. Alright, well that's going to do it for the time lapse. Let's briefly hop into live mode and check it out. Well, I gotta say, this was probably the biggest build I've ever done. And while it's not complete, I'm still extremely happy with what we've got here. Just in 2 weeks worth of work, a couple hours a night, maybe an hour a night, I think I got a lot done. I'm really happy with the way that it looks. There's still a lot of things left to do around here, like connect this to the rest of the world via the road system. I didn't really think this through too well, and it's not something that I'm particularly good at, but we'll come back to it at some point, and we'll finish it up once I have a little bit more inspiration. One thing I didn't really show you in the time-lapse was some of this stuff back here. I added some rear details, just some stuff to kind of fill out the back of the place. I'd like to add a little bit more vehicles back here, and maybe do a little bit more of the texturing in the ground. I don't really know what that's called. Let's see. Paint, I guess paint the ground. So I'd like to do a little bit more of that. Again, maybe add another parking lot back here, some kind of connect up some of these buildings, but man, I just can't right now. This was just such a ridiculous build. So much detail. I just need to move on to something a little bit more scenic and a little bit more rural, and something I can really just do some super detail work on, because that's really what I like to do. Another thing I need to do is, if you probably noticed in some of the other clips, the cinematics, that I need to add the the traffic stoppers. I hooked up the Atlas crossings and everything, but the traffic stoppers just drive me nuts, because you gotta cut them into the road, and then the road ends up being high or low or something. And then you have to relay everything, and it's just way too frustrating. I just don't want to deal with it right now. So I hooked up the lights just to have some kind of visual appeal to it, and I'll come back later and do that when I kind of feel like it. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I hope you guys really enjoyed watching this, because I enjoyed building it. I really had a lot of fun. So I think the next project we're going to do, I think I want to move down to Vonnie and do some work on the town there, add some super detail work, some street signs, and the kind of similar stuff that we did in Old Town, but you'll see, it's a little bit different of a place than Old Town, so I think we're going to have some fun with that. I really had a lot of fun with this project, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Please do, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. I'm very responsive to comments. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a snap, send me a tweet. I'm out there. I hope to hear from you guys soon. All right, see you next time.